Imagine this. Nearly 1 in 10 Americans grappling with a stealthy predator known as syphilis in the 1930s, a time when the best cures might have done more harm than good. Now picture a group of doctors deciding to watch this predator in action, choosing to observe rather than treat, all under the guise of science. In the 1930s, the United States grappled with a widespread syphilis epidemic that infiltrated the lives of nearly 1 in 10 Americans, casting a long shadow over public health. This sexually transmitted disease unveiled itself through painful sores and rashes, symptoms that lingered for approximately 2 years, only to give way to a more sinister phase. In its late stages, syphilis mercilessly attacked the body, leading to organ damage, heart and brain disorders, and even blindness, revealing the disease's relentless nature. Amid this public health crisis, the medical arsenal against syphilis was both primitive and precarious, primarily relying on mercury and bismuth. These treatments, now known for their toxic properties, were the best available options, yet their effectiveness was dubious at best, often resulting in harmful side effects rather than cure. The medical community's understanding of syphilis was mired in uncertainty, not only regarding the reliability of these treatments, but also concerning the disease's progression across racial lines. Prevailing medical theories, unfounded and steeped in racial prejudice, suggested that syphilis affected the neurological systems of white patients differently from the cardiovascular systems of black patients. This hypothesis, though lacking in evidence, fueled a determined investigation by the U.S. Public Health Service, culminating in the notorious Tuskegee experiment. In 1932, against the backdrop of a nation struggling with a syphilis epidemic, the U.S. Public Health Service, PHS, initiated an experiment that would later be etched in history as a profound ethical violation. This experiment, set in Tuskegee, Alabama, a town chosen for its significant population of African American residents and the presence of a small, accessible hospital, sought to study the natural progression of untreated syphilis in black men. Under the guise of offering free health care, the PHS successfully recruited approximately 600 black men, of whom roughly 400 were diagnosed with syphilis and 200 served as a control group without the disease. Initially, participants were provided with treatments that were considered standard at the time, such as mercury and bismuth. The Tuskegee Syphilis experiment, as it unfolded, became a stark embodiment of ethical malfeasance, particularly highlighted by the egregious withholding of treatment and the manipulation of informed consent principles. Participants, drawn from the African American community under the pretense of receiving free health care, were subjected to invasive procedures without a true understanding of their nature or purpose. Spinal taps, presented as a form of treatment, were carried out without disclosing the risks or the fact that they were part of a research study aimed at observing the progression of untreated syphilis. This betrayal of trust deepened in the 1940s with the advent of penicillin, a revolutionary antibiotic that was proven to effectively cure syphilis. Despite this medical breakthrough, the researchers overseeing the Tuskegee experiment made the deliberate decision to withhold this life-saving treatment from the participants. This decision was not merely passive, it involved active measures to ensure that the men remained untreated. During World War II, the study's architects even intervened to prevent the drafted participants from accessing military medical services where they might have received penicillin, thus prioritizing the experiment over the health and lives of the subjects. These actions, depriving individuals of their right to informed consent, subjecting them to unnecessary procedures without therapeutic intent, and deliberately denying them access to an effective treatment, highlight the profound ethical violations that characterize the Tuskegee Syphilis experiment, reflecting a dark chapter in the history of medical research. The unraveling of the Tuskegee Syphilis experiment began with the courageous actions of Peter Buxton, a public health service investigator who, upon uncovering the ethical breaches of the study, elevated his concerns through the proper channels, only to be met with indifference. Unwilling to remain silent, Buxton turned to the press, leading to a seismic media exposure in July 1972 that laid bare the experiment's stark violations of human rights and medical ethics. The public revelation of the study's true nature sparked a widespread outcry, transcending the boundaries of the medical community to stir a national debate on research ethics, racial injustice, and the value of human life. This outcry prompted a federal investigation, scrutinizing the moral and ethical foundations upon which the study was conducted. The investigation's findings were damning, leading to a lawsuit that culminated in the termination of the study later that same year. Central to the controversy was the revelation that the experiment had failed to produce any credible scientific evidence supporting the purported racial differences in the progression of syphilis, effectively nullifying the study's original premise. This absence of findings, juxtaposed with the profound human cost of the experiment, underscored the futility and inhumanity of the research, igniting a process of ethical reevaluation and regulatory overhaul in the conduct of medical research. The termination of the Tuskegee Syphilis experiment not only marked the end of a dark chapter in American medical history, but also served as a catalyst for change, prompting a re-examination of ethical standards and the implementation of safeguards to prevent such breaches from occurring in the future. The Tuskegee Syphilis experiment's closure did not mark the end of its story, but the beginning of a critical reckoning with its aftermath and the urgent need for systemic reform. The health impacts on the study's participants and their families were devastating. Many men suffered advanced stages of syphilis without relief, resulting in death, severe health complications, and the transmission of the disease to spouses and offsprings, perpetuating a cycle of suffering and injustice. This tragedy catalyzed a profound transformation in the ethical landscape of medical research. In response to the public outcry and the ethical lapses highlighted by the scandal, the U.S. government took decisive action to prevent such breaches from reoccurring. The National Research Act was signed into law in 1974, laying down the foundational principles for the ethical conduct of research involving human subjects. Central to this legislative framework was the creation of the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. This body was tasked with developing guidelines to ensure the ethical treatment of research participants, emphasizing the paramount importance of informed consent, the assessment of risks and benefits, and the equitable selection of subjects. These reforms represented a seismic shift in research governance, establishing a new ethical paradigm to safeguard human dignity and integrity within the research process. The Tuskegee Syphilis experiment's legacy is a complex web of pain, mistrust, and awakening to the deep-seated issues of systemic racism within medical research and healthcare at large. The experiment not only exposed the egregious ethical violations committed under the guise of scientific inquiry, but also underscored the pervasive racial biases that influenced medical practices and research agendas. As a direct consequence, a profound mistrust towards medical institutions and healthcare providers has been deeply ingrained within the African American community, a skepticism born out of decades of exploitation and neglect. This mistrust is not merely a relic of the past, but a living, breathing issue that continues to affect healthcare outcomes and access for many within the community. Recognizing this, there is an ongoing and urgent need for structural change within the healthcare system, demanding initiatives aimed at dismantling the racial disparities that persist. Improvements in access to care, the implementation of policies that ensure transparency in research, and the active involvement of minority communities in healthcare decision-making processes are critical steps towards rebuilding trust. The Tuskegee Syphilis scandal stands as a somber reminder of the critical importance of ethical oversight and informed consent in medical research, highlighting the devastating consequences of systemic racism in healthcare. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.